A day in the life of an air traffic controller. There are few occupations in the world that carry the level of challenges and constant associated risk than that of an air traffic controller. Here in Australia, it is the air traffic controllers working for air services that are responsible for managing the safe and orderly flow of aircraft into, out of, and between airports. And they are seriously smart people. Collectively, they manage around 11%, or 51.7 million square kilometers of the world's airspace, including some of the busiest air routes in the world. Think Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane routes. Natalie Burrows is an air traffic control line manager at the Brisbane Centre, one of two major centres operating in Australia. She's responsible for looking after groups of air traffic controllers as well as providing supervision in the operations room. She echoes the idea that air traffic control is primarily hidden. People probably don't realize how enormous the role of air traffic control is, but it's essential to keep aircraft safe. We also respond to in-flight emergencies and ensure that there is an orderly flow of aircraft into and out of airports. We have about 3,500 employees overall, and about 1,000 of those are air traffic controllers. It is a big job, and given the constant problem solving required, it is one that can be incredibly taxing. All air traffic controllers are required to take regular breaks throughout their shifts and are moved into different positions after a rest, usually every 1.5 to 2 hours. It allows them to stay fresh and alert, ready to tackle the many variables that may impact how air traffic is managed and how busy it is. A lesser-known fact about air traffic controllers is that they don't all sit up in the tall control towers we see at airports. In fact, most of them don't. There are actually 3 different categories of controllers: en route, terminal, and tower. Suzanne Anderson is a terminal or approach controller, which means she is responsible for managing aircraft that are within a 30-mile radius of Brisbane. An approach controller is the median sandwich between the tower controllers and the en route controllers, in that we manage the departures and the arriving traffic into Brisbane, and also the overflying traffic, the transiting traffic, the helicopter operations into and out of the city hospitals, scenic flights, survey flights. In Brisbane, the terminal or approach control team is made up of over 40 people. Like en route, it is broken up into several different positions. One of those positions would be the flow controller. The flow controller is responsible for taking aircraft that are about 200 miles out of Brisbane and talking to the en route controllers to put the aircraft into a nice sequence. It is always a fine line when it comes to air traffic control. Suzanne explains the terminal or approach controller must ensure the spacing of aircraft is exactly right, as close to each other as possible, but not too close so as to compromise safety. Once an aircraft has lined up on final approach, the terminal or approach controller hands them over to the tower controller, who is then responsible for the visual separation of aircraft as they come into land. It is the final piece of the puzzle, and one that Jeff Boyd is all too familiar with as a tower controller at Brisbane Airport. We look after all aircraft departing and arriving. When they're within a 5 nautical mile distance of the aerodrome, we clear them to land. We clear them for takeoff. We organize their taxiway in and out. We make sure that all coordination is done with external agencies such as Amberley Aerospace to get them through. Like the other 2 categories of controllers, tower control is also broken up into specific roles. The tower controller is responsible for the runway, meaning that any entry onto the runway is at their sole discretion. There is also the ground controller, who is responsible for the taxiways. They'll talk to aircraft, Ground vehicles such as the Brisbane Airport airside operations guys, tugs going backwards and forwards. Ground has a big responsibility in respect to listening to what the tower controller does. Because if the tower controller says there's been a bird strike, they have to call the Brisbane Airport guys. Tower controllers are able to look out of the windows of the control tower to gauge separation and ensure the timely flow of traffic. One thing you can always count on when it comes to air traffic controllers is that they understand how crucial their role is. We are aware that it is a pretty serious job. The one expression was, "We're not flipping burgers."